Welcome back to the Deep Thought Podcast. It feels like we're always told to set big goals, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Aim for the stars, reach for the moon, all that.
But what if that whole mindset is actually like setting us up for disappointment?
Interesting you say that, because that's kind of what we're looking at today. This
Mhm.
idea that maybe, just maybe, focusing on systems instead of goals could be the key to, like, unlocking some serious success.
Or I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
So our source material today is a YouTube summary of this book, Small Actions, Infinite Results.
Yes.
So listeners, think of this as like getting the best bits of a whole book without having to, read the whole thing.
Absolutely.
So one of the ideas that jumped out at me right away was this concept of aspirational fatigue.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
I mean, think about it like New Year's resolutions, career goals, fitness aspirations. It can be exhausting.
It really can. It's like that feeling of being constantly bombarded with messages about, achieving more, doing more, being more, and it can lead to burnout and this like sense that you're never quite good enough.
Yeah. I feel like I'm constantly setting these big, audacious goals and then feeling kind of bummed when I don't immediately achieve them.
Right.
Is that like what aspirational fatigue is?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, okay.
It's like you're running a race where the finish line keeps moving further away.
Mm.
And then there's this other concept the book brings up,
Yeah.
the finish line fallacy. Have you heard of this one?
The finish line fallacy? No, what's that all about?
Well, it's this idea that we often assume reaching a goal will like magically bring us lasting happiness and fulfillment.
Uh-huh.
But in reality, achieving a goal can sometimes feel, well, kind of anticlimactic.
I can definitely relate to that. It's
Yeah.
like you work so hard to reach a goal.
Yeah.
Then when you finally get there, it's like, okay, now what?
Exactly. So instead of getting caught up in this cycle of chasing goals, the book argues that we should be focusing on building systems.
Okay, so what does that mean? Like, what does a system actually look like in practice?
Okay, well, let's say your goal is to like lose 20 pounds.
Okay.
A system would be the set of, habits and routines you put in place to support that goal. So instead of fixating on the number on the scale, you'd focus on things like exercising regularly,
Okay.
making healthier food choices, getting enough sleep, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. So it's about like focusing on the process rather than the outcome.
Exactly. And the book ties this whole concept back to like how our brains actually work,
Okay.
you know?
How so?
Well, you see, our brains are wired to form habits, and systems kind of capitalize on that natural tendency.
So you're saying our brains are actually designed for systems?
In a way.
Yeah. That's interesting.
So there's this part of the brain called the basal ganglia,
Okay.
which is essentially the brain's autopilot. And when we repeat actions consistently, the basal ganglia encodes those actions into habits, making them almost automatic.
So the more we stick to our systems, the easier it becomes. It's like we're training our brains to succeed on like autopilot.
Exactly. And the book also argues that systems are actually like more motivating than goals in the long run.
Now, that's a bold statement. We're always told that setting specific, measurable goals is the key to like staying motivated.
I know, right?
So how can systems be more motivating?
Well, let's think about the typical cycle, right? You
Mhm.
set a goal, you work towards it, you achieve it, and then you get this big dopamine rush.
Huh.
But then what?
Right.
That dopamine rush fades, and you're left needing another goal to chase just for that same feeling.
So it's like this treadmill of constantly chasing that dopamine hit.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
But with systems, you get those little dopamine hits every time you like complete a task or follow through with your routine.
Oh, interesting.
It's like a constant stream of positive reinforcement.
So you're saying that goals can lead to these like short bursts of motivation, but systems provide a more like steady, sustainable source of drive.
Exactly.
Right.
It's like the difference between a sugar rush and a nourishing meal, right?
I like that analogy.
And speaking of sustenance, there's another point the book raises about how goals don't always like scale well.
Okay.
As your ambitions grow, the effort required to reach your goals can become, exponentially more demanding. But systems, on the other hand, are inherently scalable because you're focusing on optimizing the process itself.
So it's like you're building a solid foundation that can like support bigger and bigger dreams.
Precisely.
I'm starting to see the appeal of this systems approach.
Yeah.
Can you give me a concrete example of what this might look like in real life?
Yeah.
Like, what's a specific example?
Okay, let's say you want to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
That can feel like a huge, overwhelming goal.
Right.
But if you break it down into a system,
Uh-huh.
it becomes much more manageable. So instead of focusing on the finished product, you might focus on writing, say, a certain number of words every day.
So the system is the daily writing habit, and the goal of writing the book is almost secondary.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the book argues that this shift in focus can like drastically reduce stress
That makes sense.
and make the process way more enjoyable.
Yeah. Because let's be honest, who actually enjoys feeling stressed and overwhelmed?
Yeah, no one.
Okay, so the book goes even deeper and offers like a whole toolkit of concepts and strategies for building effective systems.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Give me the rundown.
All right. Well, one of the most intriguing concepts is action scaffolding.
Action scaffolding.
Yeah, it's all about breaking down those big, scary tasks into like tiny, almost effortless actions.
So instead of trying to like tackle a huge project all at once, you're breaking it down into these bite-sized steps.
Exactly. And the book explains that this approach can help eliminate that initial resistance we often feel when starting a new task.
Yeah. Like lowering the bar so low that it's almost impossible not to step over it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then, once you've got that momentum going, the book suggests leveraging something called the micro-wins blueprint.
Micro-wins. Okay, I'm definitely intrigued.
Yeah, so it's all about designing your system so that you're constantly achieving these small victories.
Okay.
They don't have to be huge, but they should be frequent and meaningful enough to keep you motivated.
So it's about creating a system where you're like consistently getting those little dopamine hits that we talked about earlier.
Exactly. The book argues that these small wins can create a powerful cycle of motivation and progress.
I'm starting to see how all of this fits together.
Yeah.
It's not just about setting goals.
Right?
It's about creating a whole ecosystem of habits, routines, and rewards that like support your overall success.
Precisely. And the book offers even more tools and strategies like momentum engineering, which is all about creating a flow of tasks where one naturally leads into the next.
So it's about like designing your day in a way that minimizes decision fatigue and maximizes productivity.
Exactly.
I'm all for that.
And we've only scratched the surface here. The book dives into so many more fascinating ideas for building a life that's not just productive, but also incredibly fulfilling.
Wow. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep thought.
Yeah.
It's clear that this system over goals idea is more than just a like productivity hack.
Definitely.
It's a completely different way of thinking about how we approach our lives.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So where do we go from here?
Well, in the next part of our deep thought,
Okay.
we're going to explore how to actually implement these systems in our daily lives.
Right.
And the profound impact they can have on, our well-being, our relationships, even our sense of purpose.
Okay, I'm eager to dive into that. Listeners, stay tuned because we're going to be unpacking even more strategies and tools to help you design a life that's not just successful, but also incredibly fulfilling.
And don't forget to check out the show notes for links to the YouTube summary of Small Actions, Infinite Results.
Yeah, great point.
If you want to get a head start on the next part of our deep thought.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We'll see you in part 2.
See you then. Welcome back to the Deep Thought Podcast.
So last time we talked about how systems can like leverage our brain's natural wiring for habits.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how do we actually translate this theory into like real life action?
That's a great question.
Yeah. Where do we even begin?
The book suggests starting with something called a values mapping exercise.
A values mapping exercise. Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah.
What's that?
Well, imagine this. You take a piece of paper and you map out your core values.
Okay.
Things like creativity, freedom, connection, whatever truly matters to you.
Gotcha.
And then you link those values to different areas of your life, your work, relationships, health.
So it's like creating a visual guide to see if your actions are actually aligned with what you value most. Right.
And this exercise can help you identify areas where you might be, out of sync and highlight where you could build systems to support your values.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's about being intentional with our actions.
Yeah.
Making sure they're moving us in the right direction.
Absolutely.
But let's be real, building new habits can be tough.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Any tips for making those systems stick?
One key is to, start small.
Okay.
Ridiculously small.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to overhaul your entire life, focus on building tiny habits.
Okay.
Things you can do consistently without much effort.
So instead of aiming to meditate for an hour every day, maybe just start with like 5 minutes.
Exactly. The book emphasizes that consistency trumps intensity, especially in the beginning.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
It's about building that momentum one small win at a time.
absolutely.
Small wins. I like the sound of that. It reminds me of something else we talked about, dopamine triggering checkpoints.
Oh, yeah, right.
Can you remind me how those work?
Sure, so think of it this way, right?
Okay.
Every time you follow through with your system,
Mm-hmm.
you reward yourself in some small way.
Okay.
It could be as simple as checking a task off your to-do list or enjoying a cup of tea after a workout.
So those small rewards essentially act as positive reinforcement,
Uh-huh.
training our brains to, like, crave the feeling of accomplishment.
Exactly. And it helps to counteract the brain's natural tendency to seek instant gratification.
So instead of reaching for that sugary snack,
Right.
you're training yourself to find satisfaction in the process itself.
Yeah, exactly.
I see how that can make a big difference in the
No.
long run.
It can.
But, we all face moments of resistance.
Oh, yeah.
How do we stay motivated when those inevitable slumps hit?
Well, that's where the power of our environment comes in.
Uh,
The book talks about creating a habit nest.
A habit nest. That sounds cozy.
It is. It is.
Tell me more.
It could be a dedicated work area, a reading nook, or even a specific corner of your kitchen for prepping healthy meals.
Okay.
The key is to create an environment that's, free from distractions and filled with cues that trigger the habits you want to cultivate.
It's like setting yourself up for success by designing your surroundings to support your goals.
Yeah, exactly that.
I'm definitely feeling inspired to create a habit nest for myself. But what about those times when, like, life throws a major curveball our way and our systems get completely derailed?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
How do we bounce back from those setbacks?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And the book offers a really interesting concept for dealing with those inevitable disruptions.
Sure.
Failure reframing.
Failure reframing. Okay, I'm all ears.
So instead of seeing setbacks as defeats,
Mm-hmm.
we can choose to view them as valuable learning experiences.
Okay.
Ask yourself, what can I learn from this?
Right.
How can I use this experience to improve my system?
So it's about shifting our perspective from, like, I failed to I learned something valuable.
Exactly. It's about embracing those challenges as opportunities for growth and refinement.
I like that.
And remember, even when you haven't achieved your ultimate goal,
Yeah.
it's important to celebrate the small wins along the way.
Those little victories can make a big difference in, like, keeping us motivated
They do.
and moving forward.
Yeah, they do.
It's like we're giving ourselves a pat on the back for showing up and doing the work, even when it's tough.
Yeah, for sure.
So, speaking of tough, let's talk about some of those, like, notorious productivity roadblocks.
Oh, yeah, those are the worst.
Procrastination, perfectionism, overwhelm.
Yeah.
Any advice from the book on how to tackle those?
Oh, yeah, definitely. For procrastination, the book suggests something called time boxing.
Time boxing, okay.
Essentially, you dedicate a specific block of time to a particular task, even if it's just for, 15 minutes.
So it's like setting a timer and saying, okay, for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to focus solely on this task, no distractions allowed.
Exactly. It creates a sense of urgency,
Wow.
and it helps break down those larger tasks into, more manageable chunks.
That's a great strategy.
Yeah.
And what about perfectionism?
Right. Well,
I know I tend to get bogged down in the details and struggle to, like, move forward unless everything is just right.
I hear you.
Yeah.
The book has a solution for that, too.
Okay, tell me.
It's called good enough thinking.
Good enough thinking.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about shifting our mindset from, striving for flawlessness to simply aiming for completion.
Right.
Remember, done is better than perfect,
Yeah.
especially when you're building new habits and systems.
So it's about giving ourselves permission to, like, let go of that need for everything to be perfect and just focus on getting things done.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
And then for overwhelm, the book suggests practicing task triage.
Task triage.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, so it's like a sorting system for your to-do list. You prioritize tasks based on their urgency and importance,
Yeah.
Focus on the most impactful items first and delegate or let go of those that are, less essential.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about being strategic with our time and energy.
Yeah.
Making sure we're focusing on the things that truly matter.
Precisely.
So the book, it sounds like it offers
It does.
even more specific tools and techniques for addressing these and other common productivity challenges.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's like a treasure trove of strategies for designing a more productive and fulfilling life.
This is all so incredibly helpful.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, it feels like we're not just talking about like productivity. We're
Right.
talking about creating a whole new way of life.
That's exactly it.
Yeah,
It's about shifting from a mindset of scarcity and struggle to one of abundance and ease.
I like that.
It's about designing systems that support our well-being, our relationships, and our overall sense of purpose.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Thank you.
It's not just about getting more done.
Right.
It's about creating a life that like feels aligned and joyful.
Absolutely.
And it all starts with taking that first step,
Yeah.
making that commitment to building better systems in our lives.
Well said. So for our listeners, stay tuned for the final part of our deep thought on systems over goals.
Okay.
We'll be diving into even more advanced strategies for building a life of sustainable success and fulfillment.
Sounds good. And don't forget to check out the show notes for links to small actions, infinite results,
Yes.
and all the other resources we've mentioned today.
Definitely.
Whoa,
We'll be
yeah,
back
wow.
soon with even more insights and inspiration.
Welcome back to the Deep Thought Podcast for the final part of our exploration into small actions, infinite results. We've covered a lot of ground, from tiny habits to habit nests. Now, I'm curious about this idea of scaling results without increasing effort. It sounds almost too good to be true.
It might sound like magic, but the book presents a pretty compelling framework for achieving just that. It draws inspiration from nature, specifically how systems in nature grow and adapt. Think of a tree, for instance.
Okay, I'm picturing a tree. What's the connection to building systems for success?
Well, a tree starts as a tiny seed, but over time it develops this intricate branching structure.
Oh.
It's strong and resilient and adaptable. The book calls this fractal system design. You're essentially creating systems that can be replicated and adapted across different areas of your life,
Yeah.
from personal projects to leading a team.
So it's like having a master blueprint that you can use to build success in any area of your life.
Exactly. And a key part of this approach is something called recursive feedback.
Recursive feedback. That sounds intense. Break it down for me.
Think of it as building continuous improvement into your system, right?
Yeah, okay.
You're constantly gathering feedback, analyzing what's working and what's not, and then, making adjustments as you go.
So it's like having a built-in system for evolution and growth.
Precisely. The book recommends incorporating these feedback loops at multiple levels. You might have a daily reflection practice, weekly check-ins with your team, or even quarterly reviews for your bigger goals. It's about constantly refining and improving your systems.
This all makes sense in theory, but what about those times when, life throws a wrench in the works?
Mm-hmm.
You know, those unexpected events that completely derail our plans,
Right.
no matter how well designed our systems are.
That's where the concept of anti-fragile architecture comes in.
Anti-fragile architecture. Okay, I'm officially intrigued. What does that even mean?
Well, it's based on the idea that some systems aren't just resilient, they actually benefit from disorder and volatility. They get stronger when things go wrong.
Wait, so it's not just about bouncing back, it's about actually growing and improving from those disruptions.
Exactly. The book suggests building this anti-fragility into your systems through things like optionality templates.
Optionality templates. Okay, now you're just making up words.
Not quite. Think of them as backup plans or contingency strategies, that you can activate when things go off track. It's about anticipating potential challenges and having multiple pathways to success.
So it's like having a plan B, and maybe even a plan C, ready to go, just in case things don't go according to plan.
Exactly. And another interesting strategy the book proposes is something called adaptive repetition.
Adaptive repetition. All right, you've got my attention. Tell me more.
It's about intentionally introducing controlled chaos into your systems.
Wait, are you saying we should deliberately mess things up?
In a controlled way, yes.
Yeah.
Think of it as stress testing your systems. You might run what the book calls chaos experiments, where you intentionally, disrupt your routine to see how your system responds.
Interesting.
It helps you identify weaknesses and build resilience.
That's a fascinating idea. It's like giving your system a workout,
To make it stronger.
So it sounds like what we're learning here, it's not just about individual productivity.
It's not, no.
It's about creating a more resilient and adaptable world.
Precisely. And it all starts with each of us taking responsibility for building better systems in our own lives.
This has been such an incredible deep thought. We've explored so many powerful ideas, Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that systems aren't just about, efficiency and productivity. They're about freedom and fulfillment. When you design your life around these principles, you create more space for creativity, joy, and meaningful connections.
I love that. It's not about becoming a robot. It's about using systems to support our human potential.
Exactly. And remember, it's a continuous journey, Systems evolve just like we do. It's about embracing this idea of infinity in action, always refining and improving our approach to life.
Infinity in action. I love that. Well, that wraps up our deep thought on systems over goals. A huge thank you to our listeners for joining us on this journey. Be sure to like, subscribe, and check out our other podcasts for more deep thoughts. We'll see you next time.
See you then.